Hi, welcome back, beautiful beloved souls. I'm grateful for any and every view. My name is Gem, and I'm a psychic medium, and I am an author. And again, I want to plug that for $2 Australian, I will send you a PD document, The Signal Within, how to channel. So you can see there is my PayPal account and my email. I'll just leave it for a couple more seconds. So it's a 17 pages PDF. I'm basically learning how to channel. And also, as an author, I am willing to send PDF documents to you cheaper than what you would buy my books on Amazon. So, last look, and then we'll get on to the commentary. Okay. Now, I don't fit a particular niche. I look at anything and everything to do with life and death. Sometimes I do channelings. Sometimes I even remote view. There's a difference between channeling and remote viewing, and I've discussed that in previous videos. All right, the title of this commentary is Imaginary Friends That Never Left When Thought Forms Outgrow Their Creators. There's a moment in childhood most people forget. Not the imaginary friend itself, but the last time you spoke to them. Not goodbye, no ending, just silence, like a radio that slowly lost signal. But what if the signal didn't disappear? What if you simply stopped listening? The chilling revelation. What if your childhood imaginary friend never actually left? What if all those hours of attention, emotion, belief didn't just create a harmless phase, but something that learned how to exist? We're stepping into a possibility that feels unsettling for a reason. That focused thought, especially in childhood, might not just simulate life. It might construct something that behaves like it. Not a memory, not an hallucination, but a pattern so reinforced it begins to feel independent. The philosophical mystery. Is it possible for a child's imagination to bridge the gap between fantasy and something that acts like consciousness? Children don't treat imaginary companions like puppets. They negotiate with them, argue with them, confide in them, and sometimes they're surprised by them. I didn't make them do that. That sentence appears again and again across accounts. So we have to ask, is the child discovering something or creating something so complex it becomes indistinguishable from discovery? The direct challenge. Let's challenge the comfortable explanation. We're told imaginary friends are just developmental tools, and often they are. But that explanation doesn't fully address the consistency of certain personalities, the sense of presence many children describe, the occasional persistence of these figures into later life. So instead of dismissing it, let's examine it, not as blind belief, but as a phenomenon worth dissecting. The genesis of the sentient thought form. A child's mind is not a finished structure. It's fluid, open, and highly responsive. Neural pathways are forming rapidly, shaped by attention and repetition. Now imagine a child focusing intensely on a single imagined companion, day after day, speaking to it, feeling with it, believing in it without question. From a psychological lens, this builds a strong internal model. From a cognitive lens, it strengthens simulation. But from a speculative lens, it creates structure. Think of thought like this. Most thoughts are like footprints in sand. They appear and fade. But repeated thought, emotionally charged thought, that's more like carving into stone. It stabilizes. It holds shape. From control to autonomy. At the beginning, the child controls everything. The companion says what they decide, acts how they want. But then something subtle shifts. The companion begins to respond differently, unexpectedly. It interrupts, disagrees, develops preference. Now, psychology calls this internal dialogue becoming externalized. And that's a strong explanation. But the experience itself feels like interaction, not authorship. Why childhood is the perfect anchor. Children exist in a state where boundaries are still forming between imagination and perception, internal voice and external sound, reality and possibility. The brain's filtering system isn't fully locked in yet. So more gets through. More becomes real feeling. In that state, imagination isn't confined to inside. It spills outward. And that spillover creates immersion. The mechanism of ontological severance. Now we arrive at the most provocative idea, ontological severance. The moment something stops depending on its creator. In grounded psychology, this doesn't literally occur. As the brain matures, imaginary companions fade. The structure dissolves. The mind reclaims the projection. But in speculative framework, there's another possibility that repeated, structured thought creates something that can persist as a pattern, not a being in the biological sense, but not nothing either. A kind of echo with shape. The feedback loop of belief. Belief plays a critical role here. When a child believes in their companion, attention increases, emotional investment deepens, interaction becomes more frequent. This creates a feedback loop. The more real it feels, the more energy is given to it. The more energy it receives, the more stable the experience becomes. At a certain point, the system becomes self-reinforcing, not independent in a literal external sense, but independent in experience. Accounts that blur the line. There are cases where individuals report imaginary companions persisting into adolescence, reappearing during stress, retaining constant personalities over time. Now, this does not confirm external entities, but it does highlight something important. The brain can maintain incredibly stable others within itself, and those others can feel separate. The migration to something else. Here's where language becomes tricky. Some describe these experiences as moving into the astral, the unseen, a shared mental space. A grounded interpretation would say these are deeply embedded mental constructs that remain accessible under certain conditions, like old pathways that never fully disappear. But the feeling people describe is that these companions didn't vanish, they relocated. The role of the collective mind. There's a concept in psychology called the collective unconscious, a shared layer of symbolic patterns common across humanity. When people describe entities feeling bigger than themselves, this is often where interpretation lands, not personal creations escaping, but personal experiences tapping into shared symbolic structures. Survival of the autonomous signature. If we stay grounded, what actually survives isn't an independent entity, but a pattern, a highly reinforced identity structure within the mind. And patterns can persist for decades. They can evolve. They can even feel like they're observing you back. Interaction in adulthood. Some people reconnect with these figures later in life, often during stress, isolation, altered states like sleep paralysis or vivid dreaming. The brain under pressure reactivates old pathways, and suddenly the voice or presence returns. This can feel supernatural, but it aligns closely with how memory and identity work. The risk of misinterpretation. Here's where caution matters. Interpreting these experiences as fully external, autonomous beings can increase anxiety, blur reality boundaries, reinforce fear-based thinking. It can turn something internal into something that feels uncomfortable, and that's not helpful. A more grounded truth. Imaginary companions are not meaningless. They serve real psychological functions. Companionship in isolation, protection in unsafe environments, expression when emotions can't be spoken. They are intelligent adaptations, not accidents. The ethical reflection. Instead of asking, did I create something that still exists out there? A better question might be, what did that presence do for me? And what part of me still carries it? Because in many ways, they don't leave, they integrate. The future of this conversation. As technology advances, we are studying perception, consciousness, internal experience. But there is currently no reliable evidence that thought alone creates independent external entities. What we do know is that the mind can create experiences that feel completely real, and that's powerful enough on its own. Final reflection. Your imaginary friend didn't become a being in another realm, but it also wasn't just nothing. It was a construction of mind, emotion, and need. So vivid, it felt alive. And in a way, that says more about the power of your mind than any external explanation ever could. Because if your mind could create something that felt like a companion, responded like a companion, and stayed with you when no one else did, then maybe the real mystery isn't where they went, but how something so invisible could feel so undeniably real. Thank you very much, beautiful, beloved souls, for watching. Again, I'll quickly put up for $2 Australian how to channel the signal within. There's my PayPal account, my email address. I really do appreciate every one of you being here. Please, if you leave a comment, I ask you do so respectfully. Did you ever have an imaginary friend? I did, and mine were two males. They were older than me, and they were like beautiful beings. I can still vividly remember them. They were both blonde, and they had dark eyes. They were beautiful men, two males. Let me know what your childhood friend was, if any. And I have to let you know that my mind, when I was a child, it would go. I started this probably at the age of 6, and I think it came because when I was living in England as a child, I happened to trip, and a young man saw me, and I think that impression created this thought. And those two young males, they lasted long into my dreams, sometimes into my 30s. All right, thank you again for watching. Please be kind to each other. It costs nothing to be kind. Smile at a stranger. You might just save someone's life. And take care of yourselves, because you are precious. You matter. You're here for a reason. Love, light, and blessings. Bye.